They say there's something sacred about silence at 40,000 feet. But sometimes the loudest stories unfold without a single word spoken. Just looks, just assumptions, and the crack of a hand where dignity should have been. The runway at Santa Barbara Executive Airport was still slick from dawn mist, a pearly silver stretching beneath a pastel sky. A light breeze teased the hangar flags. Private jets lined up like silent monuments to wealth, each gleaming under the early sun. One of them, a pristine Gulfstream G650, waited with its engines off and its secrets sealed. Inside, the flight crew bustled, polished, professional, predictable. Catherine Mullery, senior flight attendant, ran a quick gloved finger along the mahogany countertop near the galley. No dust. She liked that. Control. She adjusted her navy blazer, checked the tightness of her bun in the reflective oven door, and glanced at the manifest again. 3 passengers. 2 she knew. 1 she didn't. Then the knock. A soft, deliberate rap at the aircraft door, followed by the quiet hiss of the hydraulic stair release. A woman stepped inside. No entourage. No oversized Gucci weekender. Just a black hoodie, fitted joggers, worn Adidas, and a calm that didn't beg for permission. She didn't announce herself. She just moved with precision. Like this jet, like this world, belonged to her. Catherine was at her side in 3 strides. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, voice dipped in syrup, but eyes hard as frost. "This flight is chartered for private use only." The woman paused, just long enough to acknowledge her presence, then continued forward, slipping a slim carry-on into the overhead compartment. "I'm aware," she replied, tone cool as marble. "I'm not sure you are," Catherine said, stepping closer. "This is Flight 221 to Newark, exclusively chartered under Meridian Lux's highest clearance. Unless you have documentation." "She's on the manifest." Tony, the younger flight attendant with soft eyes and sharper instincts, had emerged from the galley, top of the list. Catherine turned, her jaw clenched. "That's impossible. Ops didn't clear anyone else." "Check again," Tony said, holding up his tablet. Her name, bold and unmissable, Dr. Nadia Holston. Catherine's smile didn't fade, but her posture stiffened. Nadia sat, crossed her legs, pulled out her phone, didn't speak again. But the tension? It slithered into the cabin like turbulence before takeoff. 10 minutes later, the door still hadn't closed. Catherine had said she was double-checking security protocol, but the truth was she was stewing, watching, judging. She returned to Nadia's seat. "I'm going to need to see some ID," she said, crisp now. All sweetness vanished. Nadia blinked. "Your colleague already confirmed who I am." "It's standard procedure." "No, it's not." That response sliced through the air like a razor. Controlled, intimate, dangerous. "I've flown Meridian Lux over a dozen times this year," Nadia continued. "Not once have I been interrogated mid-boarding." Tony called again. "Catherine, she's cleared. Ground just pinged back again. Let it go." But Catherine didn't. She leaned closer, eyes scanning Nadia's sweatshirt, like it might hold hidden danger. "We're just trying to protect our clients," she whispered. "It's not every day someone in sweats and old sneakers boards a $60 million jet." Nadia locked eyes with her, unblinking, calm. "So it's my clothes." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." A breath passed between them, waited, electric. Then Catherine said it. "I don't know who you think you are, but this kind of entitlement doesn't belong here." Nadia rose, taller now, present, still not angry, but unignorable. "I never said I was anyone," she said. "That assumption is yours." Tony saw it coming, moved fast. Too late. Catherine, red-faced and rattled, reached out, tried to guide Nadia away by the elbow. "Don't touch me," Nadia warned, firm but not loud. Catherine muttered, "I'm not doing this today." And then it happened. One open hand, one sharp crack. The sound echoed like thunder in a chapel. Tony froze. The couple in the rear cabin dropped their papers. Time fractured. Nadia didn't cry out, didn't retreat. She simply stood there, hand to cheek, eyes glazed not from pain, but from calculation. Tony's voice broke the silence. You just hit the owner of the jet. Catherine blinked, breath catching in her throat. What? She's Dr. Nadia Holston, Tony said, CEO of Vanguard Systems, majority shareholder of Meridian Lux. Catherine backed away, her world imploding behind her eyes. Tony leaned in, whispering to Nadia, We can delay. Ground her. Report this. No, Nadia said. We fly. But she's going to sit there, Nadia said, and live in what she did. And they took off. No champagne corks. No ambient music. Just a silence so loud it made everyone flinch. Catherine barely made it through the announcements. Her voice cracked twice. No one corrected her. Nadia pulled a leather folio from her bag, made a note, closed it, didn't speak again. 35 minutes into the flight, Catherine approached again, shaking. Would you like anything to drink? Nadia looked at her. No, she said. Because you think you can slap me, then offer me water? I didn't mean. You meant exactly what you did, Nadia said. You just didn't expect consequences. Catherine's voice shrank. I didn't know who you were. And if I had been nobody? Nadia's voice was soft, but surgical. Would that have made it okay? Catherine had no words. Tony whispered to her as she passed. Every inch of this plane has cameras. That footage already hit HQ. She blinked, stopped breathing, then walked away. The cockpit door opened. Captain Rob Templeton, mid-50s, composed, invited Nadia to the rear conference cabin. I just got off with HQ, he said. Legal's moving fast. Catherine will be grounded the moment we land. That's not enough, Nadia said. She laid the folder on the table. Inside, a full rollout plan. A new internal policy. Retraining. Accountability structure. I was planning to launch this Q3, she said. But now, we launch today. Templeton read, nodded. You've got my full support. I know. When they returned to the main cabin, Catherine stood, rigid, eyes red. I know I don't deserve your time, but please may I speak? Nadia didn't look up from her folder. Go ahead. I was wrong. I judged you. I saw a hoodie and forgot that decency doesn't come with a dress code. Nadia studied her. How long have you worked here? 6 years. And in 6 years, you never unlearned that instinct. No, Catherine admitted. I thought I had. You didn't see me, Nadia said. You saw who you expected me to be. Catherine nodded, eyes full. I'll never make that mistake again. You'll have time to prove that. At Newark, the jet touched down at 3:10 p.m. No applause. Just reckoning. A black SUV waited. 2 security agents, calm, alert, stood by the doors. Nadia moved to exit, but paused. Turned toward Catherine. You have a voice, she said. Use it to lift others. Not bury them beneath your assumptions. Then she walked away. Tony turned to Catherine. You okay? I don't know. It's not about being okay, he said. It's about what you do now. Back in the boardroom at Meridian Lux, 6 executives sat nervously. Nadia dropped the folder on the glass table. Effective immediately. Catherine Mallory is off active duty, she said. She'll enter the full realignment program. An exec cleared his throat. We can spin this for PR. Call it a misunderstanding. No spin, Nadia said. What happened is what happened. We don't fix culture with press releases. We fix it with truth. In a cold training room in Jersey City, Catherine sat alone. Jeans. Sweater. No badge. No blazer. Watching a training video on implicit bias. Real passengers. Real stories. Not actors. A child asking, Mom, why do they look scared when I sit beside them? And then, Nadia appeared on screen. If you're watching this, she said, you work at a company I now lead. That means we hold each other accountable. Catherine sat straighter. It's not about never making mistakes, Nadia said. It's about asking, did I treat someone better today because I finally saw them? The screen faded to black. Catherine closed her notebook. Something had changed. Somewhere else, across the country, another jet prepped for takeoff. A young black woman boarded in sneakers and a hoodie. Confident, Quiet. The flight attendant, an older white woman, smiled wide. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Spencer. Would you like still or sparkling?" No pause. No doubt. No delay. Because the slap wasn't the story. The silence that followed was. And whether you break it or bury it says everything about who you really are. The glass walls of the Meridian Lux executive suite shimmered with sunlight, but behind them, shadows moved. Deeper shadows. Ones not cast by clouds. Nadia Holston had barely stepped out of the boardroom before a red notification popped on the company's internal security system. It was flagged anonymously. Attached was a grainy clip. Not of the slap. Everyone had seen that now. But of Nadia. A timestamp from 5 years ago. Pre-Vanguard. Pre-PhD. Pre-billionaire. She was in a dim lab, arguing with a man in a blue lab coat. The clip ended mid-sentence, mid-shout, and the only thing clear was Nadia's face. Younger, but unmistakable. The file's label was even clearer. Holston. The real reason she left Baxter Dynamics. And whoever uploaded it used clearance above the VP level. Back in her penthouse apartment in Jersey City, Nadia stood in front of a window that stretched from ceiling to floor. She hadn't turned the lights on. City glow spilled across her skin. Her face was calm, but her left hand kept twitching, a silent tic, decades old. One she thought she'd buried with the past. Her phone vibrated. Tony. One new voicemail. His voice came through soft but hurried. "Dr. Holston, I didn't want to alarm you, but someone's been accessing archived flight logs. Old ones. They're looking into your flights. Not just business, personal too. I tried tracing the access, but hit a wall. Someone high up." Nadia's face didn't change, but her eyes narrowed, and her hand finally stilled. At the Meridian Training Center, Catherine finished the final day of the company's realignment program. Her hand still shook when she signed the acknowledgement form. The instructor, a soft-spoken black woman named Iris, leaned in quietly. "You did the work," she said. "I did the work," Catherine echoed, almost like she was trying to convince herself. "Doesn't mean people forget overnight." "I know, but it does mean you can choose who you are next." Catherine nodded. As she stepped into the elevator, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Still feeling sorry? Good, because the woman you bowed to, she's not who you think." The screen faded before she could reply. The lab smelled of burnt metal and ozone. "You lied to the board, Nadia." The man's voice cracked from strain, not just rage, but betrayal. "I told the board the truth they could handle." Nadia snapped, throwing a file onto the table. "You wanted to sell that system to foreign contractors. I pulled it. That wasn't your decision. It became mine when you ignored the override protocol. You just cost us $22 million. Nadia's voice dropped to a whisper. "Better than costing lives." The man, tall, pale, thinning blonde hair, slammed his hand on the table. "You think you're going to last in this industry pulling stunts like that?" "I don't plan to last in it," Nadia said. "I plan to rebuild it." And she walked out. That man's name? Gregory Vance, current Chief Operating Officer of Meridian Lux. Nadia's personal assistant, Shunny, brought her an envelope marked Internal Review Only. Inside, a printed copy of the footage. A sticky note was attached. "Some leaders lead by truth, others by omission. The board deserves both sides. G." Nadia exhaled slowly. Outside the glass, the clouds gathered. Tony couldn't let it go. After the voicemail, he stayed late, real late, combing access logs, scraping old credentials. It took him until 3:27 a.m., but he found it. An internal message board, hidden beneath archived HR memos. The posts were encrypted until he cracked one. The thread title, Project Obsidian, Holston's Black Box. Inside were 6 attachments. One was the flight manifest from Santa Barbara. Another was surveillance footage from her Baxter days. One more, a booking record showing Nadia had flown to Mexico 5 times in the last year, under an alias. 3 days later, Nadia called an emergency board session. "I know someone here leaked unauthorized footage," she said. "You want to challenge my leadership, do it to my face." Gregory Vance leaned forward, smile tight. No one's challenging your leadership, Dr. Holston. Just questioning what we were never told. About Baxter. About your private holdings. About who you were before the glossy title. Nadia's eyes flicked to him. She didn't blink. You think I buried something, she said. I think the world deserves to know if the woman demanding transparency is hiding something. Nadia stood. Fine. Let's get transparent. She tapped the remote. The screen behind her lit up. A paused video. Surveillance. A hangar. A man wheeling a case onto an unregistered jet. Nadia hit play. The man was Gregory Vance. The case. Labeled Obsidian, unauthorized prototype. Gasps echoed around the room. Careful, Gregory, Nadia said, voice razor-sharp. You're not the only one who kept receipts. He stood. This is fake. Test it. I've already given a copy to the Department of Aviation Ethics. Boardroom silence. One of the directors turned to Nadia. What do you want us to do? Nadia looked at the camera lens in the corner of the room, the one recording every moment. Start with accountability, she said. Catherine left her final session to find a man waiting by her car. Early 50s. Cuff jeans. Sand-colored blazer. You're Catherine Mallory? Yes. He handed her a file. Inside, documents showing that the real estate firm that sold her apartment was owned by a shell company. That shell company, owned by Holston Ventures. She gave you a second chance, the man said. But not everyone in this company believes in redemption. I suggest you pick a side. Who are you? A friend? Or a warning? He vanished into the parking lot shadows. Nadia boarded another jet. This one felt different. Not because the seat was softer. Not because the crew was silent. But because there was something waiting. Tony handed her a new file mid-flight. Catherine's been contacted, he whispered. Nadia nodded. And Gregory, he asked. Under federal review, she replied. But he's not done. Men like that don't stop. They circle. Outside the window, clouds drifted beneath them like ghosts. Then Nadia turned. Tony, I need you to find out something. What's that? Who else knew about Project Obsidian and what they're hiding from me? The apartment was dim. Just the glow of a single lamp humming near the corner, casting shadows across the wall like quiet ghosts. Nadia sat at her glass dining table, fingers pressed to her lips, phone glowing in front of her. An anonymous message blinked on the screen. It wasn't just Vance. Check the Singapore files. Start with the pilots. Her finger hovered over the text. She didn't reply. Instead, she whispered, almost to herself. They weren't watching me. They were watching who I was watching. Tony, across the city, sat in a co-working space with bloodshot eyes and a trail of open tabs that ran like a digital crime scene. He'd found the Singapore files, at least the redacted version, but the deeper he dug, the more he saw flight records with flagged names. 3 pilots. 2 were terminated. The third, promoted, quietly, with a bonus payout tagged internal clearance. That pilot's name, Braden West, and he just filed a request for leave. 2 weeks in a remote villa, sponsored by an offshore firm named Alteris Holdings. Tony's eyes narrowed. He opened a second browser. Alteris Holdings equals Greg Vance's personal shell account. He whispered, damn. He's not just covering tracks. He's rewarding them. Catherine was back in uniform. Not on flights. Not yet. But she'd been reassigned to groundside guest relations, a title that felt as empty as the smiles she wore in the VIP lounge. Some greeted her politely. Others avoided her like her apology was contagious. Her new supervisor handed her an iPad. Gate 4. New boarding. High clearance. Client prefers discretion. She nodded and walked out. Gate 4 wasn't on the manifest. It led to a jet that didn't carry company branding. And when the client stepped out, Catherine's stomach twisted. It was Gregory Vance, wearing aviator glasses and a too-casual grin. He paused when he saw her. Catherine, nice to see you back in rotation. She swallowed. Didn't expect you here. Funny. Neither did she, he said, walking past her without another word. Nadia met with Shani and Tony inside a soundproof conference room under Vanguard HQ. Tony slid the folder across the table. West is the key, he said. He was Vance's courier, paid to deliver a prototype abroad, if we can get him to talk. He won't, Nadia said. Tony frowned. How do you know? Because the villa he's headed to, she replied. I own it. They stared at her. I bought it 6 months ago. I bought Alteris too. Quietly, while building out our legal net. Everything Greg's been using to move in silence is under my thumb. But then why is he still running free? Shunny asked. Nadia looked at her. Because I wanted to see who'd follow him. And now I have. She tapped the folder. There's someone else on the inside. Not just a Meridian. In Vanguard, a ghost signature shows up every time I log into the executive vault. You think there's another mole? Tony asked. I don't think, Nadia said. I know. Catherine stood outside the lounge restroom, clutching her phone. Her hands trembled. A message just came through. He's going to bury her. You don't owe her anything. But if you speak now, you better mean it. She stared at the number. Unknown. But the timing? Too precise to be random. At the villa, Braden lounged poolside, sipping neat bourbon and flipping through emails on a secure tablet. Then the music paused. His phone pinged. He looked down to see a video playing. Security footage. It showed him. In the hangar. 5 years ago. Handling that same black case. His badge visible. His face clear. A voice rang through his AirPods. This is how it ends unless you talk. The next people you hear from will not be as patient as me. He jumped to his feet, panic rising. There was no return message. No number to call. Just silence. Then his phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Check the gate manifest. Catherine just saw Vance. She's not your alibi anymore. Back in her private office, Nadia sat with a silent fury brewing behind her calm expression. She held an unsealed envelope. Inside was a single photo, Catherine in the VIP lounge. Face pale. Watching Vance board. There was a note scribbled across the top. She's still deciding. Nadia placed it gently in a drawer. Then opened another. Inside, a series of letters addressed to federal agencies. Already stamped. Already signed. She whispered to no one in particular. I gave them a choice. I won't ask again. Catherine was summoned to HQ the next morning. She walked through the marble halls like a ghost in her own body. Every step echoed. Every reflection in the glass caught her shame. The receptionist pointed to a side room. Inside, Nadia. Alone. No assistant. No lawyers. No security. Catherine stepped in, breath shallow. I didn't know you'd be here. I made it quiet on purpose, Nadia replied, so you'd speak truth without an audience. Catherine opened her mouth, but Nadia raised a hand. I don't want an apology. I want clarity. She slid a folder across the table. Inside, surveillance from Gate 4. A full transcript. Every move. Every look. I already know you saw him, Nadia said. What I don't know is whether you told him anything. I didn't. Why not? Because I remembered the look in your eyes. That day. The silence. Nadia leaned back. And what does that silence mean to you now? That I was wrong about you, Catherine said, voice cracking, and that I'm not afraid of losing my job anymore. I'm afraid of staying the same. Nadia didn't respond. She just stood, walked to the window, then said quietly, You have 24 hours to decide whether you're with us or watching from the sidelines when it all burns. That night, Vance boarded a private plane out of Teterboro. He didn't know that Catherine had slipped a copy of the manifest to Tony. He didn't know that Nadia had already alerted Interpol. He didn't know that Braden West had panicked and flipped. He just sat in the cabin, sipping his drink, reading old memos, assuming power still answered to him. But 10 minutes before takeoff, the jet door opened. 2 agents stepped in, and behind them Nadia. No hoodie this time. No silence. Just steel. Vance stood slowly. You really think this ends here? Nadia stepped forward. No, she said. This is where it begins. Rain tapped like fingers across the jet's aluminum skin. The engines were off. The air was cold. And Gregory Vance stood motionless in a crisp charcoal suit, flanked by 2 Interpol officers and staring at a jet he never thought he'd exit in handcuffs. Across the tarmac, Nadia Holston stepped down from a black SUV. Trench coat draped over her frame, umbrella untouched. Vance smirked despite the steel at his wrists. "You're enjoying this," he said. Nadia didn't blink. "No, I'm making it unforgettable." Then she turned and walked away before the cuffs clicked tighter. Inside Vanguard's legal war room, Tony slid a flash drive into the projection console. 6 attorneys leaned in as footage filled the screen. The hidden logs, West's confession, Catherine's statement, and metadata proving Vance had been laundering intellectual property through the Singapore vault. The lead counsel, a gray-haired woman with a granite jaw, looked at Nadia. "We have enough to bury him," she said. "Not bury," Nadia corrected. "Illuminate. Let the world see what power looks like when it's not afraid to tell the truth." Catherine sat across from HR and the diversity board. "This isn't about punishing you," said Iris, the woman who once trained her. "It's about whether you've earned trust, not just top-down, but side to side." One by one, fellow staff read aloud anonymous peer reviews. Some were hesitant, some were raw, but one voice cracked the room wide open. She made a mistake. She made it public, and she stayed in the fire long enough to be shaped by it. That's more honest than most of us ever get. Catherine's throat tightened. The review had been submitted by Tony. In the main conference room, Nadia stood before the board with a single-page printout titled, "Project Elevate, a Culture That Sees." It outlined sweeping changes. Anonymous incident reporting linked directly to oversight. AI-assisted flagging of behavioral bias in hiring and service. Company-wide elevation workshops, co-led by staff and former clients. Permanent removal of Greg Vance's name, contracts, and licensing deals. "This isn't a PR campaign," Nadia said. "It's who we are now." Not one board member challenged her. Later that week, an envelope appeared on Shani's desk. No sender, no note, just one item inside. A photo of Nadia, taken 6 weeks ago, walking into a courthouse in D.C. Stamped across the back in red. She lied under oath. Case sealed. For now. Shani brought it straight to Nadia. Nadia studied the image. Quiet. Focused. She didn't ask where it came from. She simply asked, "Who else knows about this?" Tony tracked the courthouse visit, dug through sealed case numbers, found only one connected to Vanguard. A whistleblower suit, dismissed pretrial. Plaintiff gagged. But the twist? The attorney who represented the opposing side used to work for Greg Vance. It was the final link. Vance hadn't just stolen hardware. He had stolen silence. Blackmailed it. Bought it. Weaponized it. Tony looked at the old memo, hands shaking. If this got out, it would drag Vanguard into the fallout. Nadia's legacy at risk. Catherine stood in front of a packed training hall. Not as a host, as a speaker. "My name is Catherine O'Leary. I worked for Meridian Lux for 6 years, and I almost lost everything because I assumed who someone was based on a hoodie." People didn't nod. They watched. Here's the truth. The slap wasn't the problem. It was the thinking behind it. She paused, breathing heavy. Redemption isn't a warm bath. It's a fire. And if you can't sit in the heat long enough to be changed, you're not ready to fly for people. That line got applause. Not loud, but enough. Days later, Nadia convened a closed executive session. 2 seats were empty. Shani set a file in front of her. "We found the leak. It wasn't Greg alone." She flipped the top page. Name Layla D'Angelo, Chief Strategy Officer. Relationship, former legal counsel to Baxter Dynamics. Secret co-author of Vance's merger terms. Nadia leaned back, eyes closed. One breath. Then she whispered, "I trusted her." Shani nodded. That was the mistake he needed. Layla was summoned. She entered the room like nothing was wrong. Nadia didn't yell. She didn't accuse. She just handed her a document. "Your resignation," she said. "Signed by you. 3 weeks ago. You just didn't know I'd find it." Layla opened it. Inside, an AI-forged contract. Her signature copied. "This is illegal," she hissed. Nadia tilted her head. "You broke the rules of trust. I just changed the game board." Layla's hands shook as security approached. Nadia turned away, but not before whispering, "You were right about one thing. Silence is a currency. But I own the bank now." 3 months later, a Gulfstream lifted off from Teterboro. Inside, Catherine served a new client, a black teenager in jeans and sneakers, flying to pitch her STEM idea to NASA. The girl smiled nervously. "You sure I belong here?" Catherine kneeled beside her. "Kid, this whole sky belongs to you." In her office, overlooking the Hudson, Nadia spoke into a recorder. Legacy isn't built on press releases. It's built on what happens after you've been tested in front of witnesses. Not everyone gets a second chance, but if they do, make it count. She clicked stop. Outside, another jet climbed into the blue. Dust danced through golden sunlight as the jet touched down on the sleek tarmac of Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. As the door hissed open, cameras clicked like wildfire. Nadia Holston stepped out. No security, no entourage, just her. She wasn't here for a photo op. She was here to walk into a high school courtyard with her sleeves rolled up and listen to girls who had built drones from scrap metal and soldered dreams. Her new initiative, Skycode Africa, wasn't just a program. It was a movement. But in the background, across the globe, a different movement was brewing, and it had her name at the center. At Vanguard HQ, a federal subpoena was quietly unsealed. It wasn't about Greg Vance this time. It was about Nadia's sealed testimony from the Baxter Dynamics case, a case that, until now, had been buried under layers of executive privilege. One of the names reappearing in whispers, Senator Reuben Carver, the man who once approved funding for Baxter's military AI program, the man who's now up for re-election. A reporter from the Guardian Ledger received an anonymous leak. Subject line: "The woman you all worship is still hiding something." Catherine sat in a classroom. She wasn't teaching. She was learning. After completing her leadership rehabilitation, she had been offered a new position, head of ethics and equity training at Meridian Lux. But the weight never left. Even when she was praised, even when she smiled, there was always a corner of her heart that asked, "Have I really changed? Or just found better language to hide the same instincts?" Her mentor, Iris, handed her a book, Radical Accountability, Leading After Harm. Inside, the inscription read, "Real change doesn't clear your record. It makes you brave enough to show it to others." Catherine closed the book and whispered, "I'm not hiding." Tony, now director of cyberforensics at Vanguard, stared at a wall of code and metadata. He'd been following breadcrumbs for months. The reporter leak didn't come from Vance or Layla. It came from inside Vanguard's financial legal division. Someone with clearance high enough to access the sealed court deposition of Nadia Holston, a document that was supposed to be expunged after her whistleblower immunity was granted. Tony decrypted the server logs. Only one name pinged that day: Martin Ellison, Nadia's former legal advisor. And he hadn't worked alone. Nadia sat across from Martin in a quiet conference room overlooking Manhattan. She didn't speak at first. She just placed a printed copy of the leak on the table. He didn't deny it. "I made a deal," he said, voice low. "You were becoming too powerful, too unshakable. That makes enemies. I tried to protect the company from you." Nadia stared. "You thought this was about me?" Martin didn't answer. "You didn't protect the company," she said. "You protected comfort. Yours. Theirs. The kind that chokes people in hoodies and calls it protocol." She slid a resignation form across the table. "Sign it and walk away. That's more mercy than you gave me." The leaked court transcript made the news. It was twisted, taken out of context. A younger Nadia had once refused to name a government contractor by name, fearing it would lead to wrongful prosecution of lower-level engineers uninvolved in the scandal. The media spun it. Headlines read, "Holston withheld names during federal testimony. Tech CEO complicit in Baxter cover-up?" Power, privilege, and the illusion of integrity. But what they didn't show, the final page of the transcript, where Nadia had offered to step down from the industry if any link between her work and civilian harm was proven. That clause saved her from legal peril, but not from public suspicion. Shunny paced Nadia's office. "We can push back. File defamation. Remind the world who you really are." Nadia stood at the window. What if we do none of that? Shani blinked. Excuse me. What if we let the world watch the process, the hard, messy, unfiltered process of someone being held to their own standards? Shani's eyes widened. You want to go public? Nadia nodded slowly. Live interview. No script. No PR spin. One camera. One seat. Just me. It aired on every major network. No background music. No dramatic intro. Just a tight frame. One woman. One truth. I'm Nadia Holston. I'm a CEO, a daughter, a survivor of systemic dismissal, and someone who once believed silence was the safest path to change. She looked straight into the lens. But I was wrong. I didn't speak loudly enough when it could have protected others. I didn't name names. Not because I was afraid, but because I thought justice was quiet. It's not. Accountability doesn't mean cancellation. It means carrying the weight you helped build. I carry mine. Will you carry yours? Comments poured in. Some praised her bravery. Others called it performative. But then something shifted. Former engineers from Baxter began speaking up, each one confirming Nadia's claims that she had fought inside the system, even when no one saw her. Whistleblowers came forward. A class action suit was filed, not against Nadia, but with her, naming the real perpetrators she tried to shield others from. The truth finally cracked open. Nadia returned to the skies, but not in luxury. She flew commercial, middle seat, hoodie on, hair tied back. A woman across the aisle looked at her and whispered to her partner, "That's her. That's the woman they tried to cancel." Nadia smiled gently. "Correction," she said. "They tried to define me." The jet lifted, and this time, no one questioned where she belonged. The auditorium was full. Cameras, delegates, CEOs, activists, students, all eyes facing the main stage. There was no music, no lights dimmed for effect. Just a single spotlight. Nadia Holston stepped forward in a charcoal pantsuit, pinless hair, and bare face. She gripped the podium, not like a CEO speaking down to a crowd, but like a survivor telling the truth without armor. 2 years ago, I boarded a plane, in sneakers and a hoodie. I was slapped for not belonging. And I stayed silent, not because I lacked words, but because I wanted the silence to say what words couldn't. She paused. But now, I speak. Inside a prison visiting room, thick glass separated them. Greg Vance looked gaunt. The orange jumpsuit didn't dull his smirk. "You got what you wanted," he said. "Now what? Save the world." Nadia leaned in slowly. "No, I'm going to change it until women who look like me never have to explain why they're allowed to exist where they already do." Greg's smirk faded. "You think the system cares about your justice speech?" She smiled faintly. "No, but I'm not talking to the system anymore. I'm talking to the people building what comes after it." She stood. Enjoy obscurity. Tony stood in a Vanguard office with glass walls, explaining the new AI ethics scanner to a group of recruits. It doesn't just track bias in language. It listens to tone, timing, silence. Because sometimes discrimination hides in the pauses. One of the interns raised a hand. "What if it flags someone unfairly?" Tony nodded. "Then we investigate. Not to punish, but to understand. The goal isn't perfection. It's progress." Across campus, Catherine sat in a circle of staff members, a mix of race, age, gender. "I used to think inclusion meant inviting people to your table," she said. "But sometimes it means stepping away from it and asking who built it in the first place, and why some seats are still bolted to the floor." In a locked tech lab, Shani stood before a multi-monitor setup, a new AI facial recognition prototype, meant to be rolled out in airports globally, blinked on screen. But something wasn't right. It misidentified darker-skinned passengers, 3 times more than lighter ones. "Why hasn't this been flagged?" she asked the engineer. The man hesitated. "We were told to suppress outliers," said it wasn't statistically significant. Shani's jaw clenched. She clicked a few lines deeper. The funding came from Orion Tech, a shadow spin-off of Baxter Dynamics. And the final signature on the proposal? Layla D'Angelo. Back, under a different name. Rebranding bias as innovation. Back at Vanguard HQ, Nadia held a red file labeled Project Iris Intercept. "This isn't a glitch," she told the board. "This is legacy code from a corrupt system, repackaged to look like progress." One board member, younger, tried to reason. "Should we pause the project?" "No," Nadia said. "We replace it. Root and stem." She tossed the red file onto the table. "If we can scan skin, we can scan motives." Everyone went silent. Then, a slow nod from Vanguard CFO. "We back your call." Nadia didn't smile, but her eyes said everything. In a small town in Georgia, a black teenage girl in overalls enters an aviation scholarship program named after Nadia Holston. At a private airport, a woman wearing sweats and a duffel bag is escorted onto a luxury jet. No questions asked. The flight attendant says, "Welcome, Dr. Reyes. Your seat is ready." At a college ethics panel, a professor quotes a single sentence from Nadia's summit speech. "The places we once whispered to be allowed into are now the ones we're designing." Nadia boards a late-night flight. Alone. No cameras. No briefcase. Just a paperback novel and peace. She walks past the galley where a young flight attendant, maybe 22, watches her. Their eyes meet. He says nothing, but his body shifts with instinct. Not suspicion. Respect. She sits. Window seat. The plane lifts. Above the clouds, she closes her eyes. And for the first time since that slap, she exhales like she's no longer carrying a fight in her lungs. Power doesn't always speak loud. Sometimes it boards quietly and redefines what flight really means.